What if I told you that right now, as you're watching this video, the US government is collecting a hidden tax from you, one that most Americans don't even know exists? Not income tax, not sales tax, something different. In 2025, the average American household paid $1,000 extra because of this hidden tax. In 2026, that number is set to hit $1,300 per household, according to the Nonpartisan Tax Foundation. We're talking about tariffs, and the story of what's really happening with them in 2026, including a bombshell Supreme Court ruling you probably didn't hear about, is one of the most important financial stories in America right now. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly where your money is going and who's really paying the price. Welcome to the Money Trail. Let's follow it. If this is your first time here, welcome. This channel is about one thing: connecting the dots between money, power, and the decisions that affect your everyday life. No jargon, no agenda, just clear, research-backed analysis that tells you the story behind the money. Now, let's get into it. First, a quick primer for anyone who needs it. A tariff is essentially a tax on imported goods. When an American company buys something from another country, say electronics from China or furniture from Vietnam, the US government charges a fee on that import. That fee is a tariff. Now here's the key thing that politicians often gloss over, and this is crucial. Foreign countries don't pay that tariff. American importers do. And those importers then pass the cost on to, you guessed it, American consumers. This is not a political opinion. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York confirmed in early 2026 that American consumers and companies paid nearly 90% of the cost of the 2025 tariffs. Not China, not Mexico, not Europe. Americans. So when the government imposes a tariff, it is, by any measure, a tax on American households. Now let's talk about the scale of what happened. In 2025, President Trump implemented what economists are calling the most aggressive tariff regime in modern American history. The Tax Foundation, a nonpartisan research organization, calculated that Trump's 2025 tariffs represented the largest U.S. tax increase as a percentage of GDP since 1993. The biggest tax increase in over 30 years. The federal government collected $264 billion in tariff revenues in 2025 alone. To put that in perspective, that is more than the entire annual budget of the Department of Defense procurement program. And for the average household, $1,000 in extra costs in 2025. The Tax Foundation projects that rises to $1,300 per household in 2026, even without any new tariffs being added. Why does it keep rising even without new tariffs? Because the full effect of tariffs takes time to reach consumers. Federal Reserve research found it takes approximately 7 months for tariff costs to fully pass through to retail prices. The 2025 tariffs are still working their way through the system right now. Think about that the next time you are at the grocery store and wonder why coffee costs more, why your furniture bill went up, why that new TV seems more expensive than it should be. Coffee prices up 33.6%. Ground beef up 19.3%. Furniture and bedding up 4%. Dishes, bowls and flatware up 5%. These are not random price increases. There is a money trail, and we are following it. Now here is the part of this story that most mainstream media buried under other headlines, and it is arguably the most important legal development in U.S. trade policy in decades. On February 20th, 2026, the United States Supreme Court issued a landmark 6-3 ruling in a case called Learning Resources Incorporated versus Trump. The court held that the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, known as IEEPA, does not authorize the president to impose tariffs. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote the majority opinion, joined by Justices Sotomayor, Kagan, Gorsuch, Barrett, and Jackson. The court concluded that the power to impose tariffs is clearly a branch of the taxing power, reserved for Congress under Article 1 of the Constitution, not the president. This is enormous. Why? Because nearly all of Trump's 2025 reciprocal tariffs, the ones imposed on Liberation Day in April 2025, were based on IEEPA authority. The Supreme Court just said that authority does not exist for tariffs. According to Penn Wharton budget model economists, the IEEPA tariffs collected approximately $179 billion, a figure exceeding the combined fiscal year 2025 spending of the Department of Transportation and the Department of Justice. The ruling immediately opened the door for businesses to claim refunds on those tariff payments. More than 1,000 businesses had already filed for refunds before the ruling was even issued, a number expected to grow significantly. But here is where the story gets even more interesting. Within hours of the Supreme Court decision, President Trump signed a new proclamation, this time under Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974, imposing a fresh 10% global tariff, effective February 24, 2026. He then announced plans to raise it to 15%, the maximum allowed under Section 122. The game of legal chess continues, and American households remain caught in the middle. Here is something that rarely gets discussed in the tariff debate. Who actually bears the heaviest burden? The Yale Budget Lab analyzed the distributional impact of the 2026 tariffs and found something striking. Tariffs function as a regressive tax. That means lower-income households pay a higher percentage of their income compared to wealthier households. Think about it this way. A family earning $40,000 a year, spending $1,300 more on tariff costs, is losing over 3% of their income. A family earning $400,000 losing the same $1,300 barely notices it. The Council on Foreign Relations estimated in January 2026 that current tariff policy would raise the Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index by 1.2%. Costing the average household $1,681 in real income losses when accounting for the full economic effect. And what about the goods most affected? Primarily the things working and middle-class Americans buy most: groceries, clothing, furniture, electronics, and cars. Major companies have already confirmed this publicly. Procter & Gamble raised prices on 25% of its products, citing a $1 billion annual tariff impact. Beer maker Constellation Brands reported a $20 million hit. Walmart, Amazon, Target, all passing costs to consumers. The money trail is clear. The tariff goes in at the port. It works its way through the supply chain, and it arrives at your door. Now let us zoom out, because this is not just a domestic American story. The ripple effects of U.S. tariff policy are reshaping the entire global trading system. According to a June 2026 report from the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation, the most durable effect of the 2025 tariffs has been a major shift in how countries trade with each other. Nations are actively reducing their dependence on both the United States and China, forming new bilateral trade deals at a pace not seen in decades. Early predictions of catastrophic global recession have not materialized, but the structural changes are real and lasting. The United Nations' latest World Economic Situation and Prospects report put global growth at around 2.7%, still below pre-pandemic averages. The World Economic Forum describes the current moment as an age of competition marked by geopolitical tension and fragmented capital flows. J.P. Morgan Global Research, in its 2026 Market Outlook forecast, a 35% probability of a U.S. and global recession in 2026. Not certain, but not negligible either. Agricultural exports to China fell from $12 billion in 2024 to $5.5 billion in the first half of 2025 alone. Devastating for American farming states. The bottom line: when the United States sneezes economically, the rest of the world still catches a cold. And right now, U.S. trade policy is creating uncertainty that affects businesses, supply chains, and household budgets from Iowa to Indonesia. So where does all of this leave us heading into the rest of 2026? Several things are worth watching closely. First, the Section 122 tariffs imposed by Trump after the Supreme Court ruling are temporary by law, set to expire after 150 days, around July 24, 2026, unless extended by Congress. Whether Congress acts and how will be one of the biggest economic stories of the summer. Second, the refund question. The Court of International Trade ordered Customs and Border Protection to begin issuing refunds on IEEPA tariffs. But that process is contested and moving slowly. Billions of dollars are at stake. Third, the Federal Reserve is caught in a difficult position. Tariffs are pushing prices up, which normally argues for keeping interest rates higher. But economic uncertainty argues for cutting rates to support growth. The Fed's dual mandate is under genuine stress. And fourth, the broader question of whether American manufacturing is actually benefiting. Yale Budget Lab analysis found that U.S. manufacturing output expands slightly under tariff protection, but construction contracts by 2.4%, and agriculture declines by over 1%. The overall net effect on economic output remains negative. The money trail does not lie. Tariffs are generating tax revenue, but at a significant cost to American households, economic growth, and America's global trade relationships. Let us bring it back to where we started: a hidden tax. One that costs the average American household $1,300 this year. One that was partly struck down by the Supreme Court, only to be replaced within hours by a new version. One that is reshaping global trade while ordinary Americans pay at the checkout counter. The official narrative says tariffs protect American jobs and punish foreign competitors. The data from the Federal Reserve, the Tax Foundation, the Yale Budget Lab, and the Penn Wharton budget model tells a more complicated story. American consumers and companies are paying nearly 90% of the cost, the largest tax increase since 1993, and the full economic ripple effects are still working their way through the system. That is the money trail, and now you have followed it. If this video gave you clarity on something that has been affecting your wallet without you knowing why, hit subscribe. Because every week, we follow the next trail. And there is always a next trail. I am the Money Trail. See you next week.